the mechanisms that cells use to generate energy, for instance, and use oxygen, respiration, each individual cell basically burns glucose to produce energy. But as one ages, that process gets leaky, and you get reactive oxygen species get produced, and those lead to inflammation. You don't have as much energy, so the repair systems start to fall apart. So there's this general process of aging, right? And that impinges on everything that's going on in the cell, but the way PP2A comes in is it's this global regulator. So as long as you have energy metabolism, you have metabolic synthesis of precursors, you have protein synthesis, you have all the sort of nuts and manufacturing that goes on in cells. But superimposed on that, and about half the genes that are in a cell are regulatory.
Jeff was studying PP2A. He wasn't looking at neurodegenerative diseases in any way, shape, or form. And once we discovered that PP2A was a regulator of tau, that's when the light started to go off.
We didn't discover that. That was discovered.
Once we found out about it.
The main guy that did it was Iqbal on Staten Island.
Dr. Khalid Iqbal.
Yeah, and he was the pioneer he studied tau, the tau protein. He's an expert on, and has spent his life working on Alzheimer's disease. I have come to Alzheimer's disease only very recently.
Dr. Iqbal's the founder of the International Alzheimer's Conference. He's a big part of what we're doing. He's a scientific advisor to Signum.
He did a study.
We just published a paper with Dr. Iqbal showing EHT's ability to rescue the effects of hyperphosphorylated tau deficit
in a rat model for Alzheimer's that he's developed. And so there are two cytological things that you can see at autopsy in the brain of a person who has Alzheimer's disease.
But also in the brain of a football player that's died from CTE. Not just somebody with Alzheimer's, but when they crack open a football player, let's say they cracked open Junior Seau's brain, they also saw what Jeff's about to describe.
Right, so what you see is these inclusions, they're aggregated proteins that are in the neurons that are associated with neurodegeneration.
Neurofibrillary tangles.
And they're called neurofibrillary tangles. They actually look like little tangles of protein that are not there in a healthy brain. And they're very closely associated with the neurodegenerative process. And they have this protein tau. And Dr. Iqbal and a lot of other people have studied that has been a clue to try to understand how Alzheimer's works. Right. And it turns out that this PP2A protein interacts with tau as Max has described. So that's we could put that together with the work I had been doing on PP2A just in the laboratory without any regard for any disease at all. My work was on a modification of PP2A. So what was known at the time and has been established in many different laboratories is that the defect in tau is related to a defect in the regulation of PP2A. And what I discovered at Princeton was a key mechanism in the regulation of PP2A that's defective turns out to be defective in Alzheimer's. So that's what seems to happen in neurodegenerative disease, in cancer, in type 2 diabetes. Your aging is the primary problem, right? Things are falling apart. You're not able to do things as well. But as long as you keep that regulatory network intact, you can keep functioning. You're not functioning as well. You're degrading, but you're still able to keep the whole thing together, and you don't get disease. You keep your connections. You still have your memory, right? But when you start to lose PP2A, which is the big cop in the regulating everything, when that regulation starts to become compromised, then the whole thing falls apart. And then all the regulatory processes which used to to be working more or less in an orchestrated way, and it's so complicated what's going on in just one cell. I can't emphasize that more. I don't think people realize how complicated the biochemistry is that regulates things and that performs all these functions. Once that starts to fall apart, then you have cancer, you have neurodegenerative disease, you're toast.